In this section, I will look at configuring wireless adapters for Windows Server 2008. In recent years, the use of wireless has become more and more common. Unlike wired networks, wireless signals travel through the air and can be intercepted by a third party. Because of this, understanding how security works in a wireless network is paramount to using them successfully. In this video, I will first look at wireless standards. Over the years, there have been a lot of different wireless standards. It is important to understand these so when you purchase a wireless device, you know what the range of this device is and how fast it can transfer data. Since wireless is transferred through the air, it is very easy for someone in range of the wireless access point to intercept your communications. Because of this, wireless security is very important, and I will look through all the different protocols you can use to secure your wireless access points. Next, I will look at the different wireless modes you can configure your wireless adapter to operate in. Finally, I will look at how to configure a bootstrap wireless profile. A bootstrap wireless profile is generally used when you have a lot of computers on your network that you want to configure up for wireless access. When looking at wireless access, there are 4 different standards that are used. The first is 802.11a. This is the oldest of the standards and was not very popular. It has largely been abandoned nowadays in favor of the other standards. The standard uses 5.4 GHz range to transmit. This frequency has a very short range and due to the short wavelength is easily absorbed by solid objects in its path. Even being able to operate at 54 megabits per second, the short range made the standard very unpopular. The next standard is 802.11b. This standard operates at the 2.4 GHz range. This frequency gives the standard a longer range, but unfortunately the standard only runs at 11 megabits per second. This standard was a lot more popular than the 802.11a standard. If you are connecting your laptop up to the internet, this standard is not too bad since even high-speed home internet connections are generally not this high. If, however, you want to connect computers up to networks and other computers, this standard is quite slow. Unfortunately, quite a lot of other devices operate on the 2.4 GHz band. These include microwave ovens, Bluetooth devices, and cordless telephones. This can reduce the speed and range of your wireless network. The third standard is 802.11g. This standard again operates at the 2.4 GHz band, so does suffer from the same problems of interference as the 802.11b does. The G standard operates at 54 megabits per second, however, and is quite popular in the marketplace. A lot of wireless devices support both the B and G standard. The latest standard is the 802.11n standard. This standard uses MIMO, which stands for Multiple Input, Multiple Output. Put simply, this means the standard uses multiple frequencies to get a high throughput. The standard claims by using this technology that it can achieve data transfer rates of up to 300 megabits per second. In the real world, you are probably not going to get the standard to operate that fast. However, it is still faster than the G standard. Unfortunately, as soon as you start using wireless, security becomes important. Because wireless communications travel through the air, anyone within range can intercept your communication. There are a number of different ways you can increase the security of your wireless network. First, you can disable the SSID. The SSID, or Service Set Identifier, broadcasts the name of your network to wireless devices on the network. If you have ever had a message appearing on your computer saying a wireless network has been detected by the name of, this is due to the wireless network broadcasting the SSID so that other computers can locate it. The reality is that disabling the SSID just stops people finding your network by accident. If someone attempts to hack into your wireless, disabling the SSID is unlikely to stop them. The next level of security you can place on your wireless is MAC security. MAC security is when you either allow or deny a device from accessing the wireless by its MAC address or Media Access Control address. This again is very basic security as the MAC address can be faked. If you are running a virtual machine, for example, you can easily change the configuration of the virtual machine's MAC address to any address you wish. The security discussed so far is only very basic access security and does not stop anyone from eavesdropping on your network traffic. If you want to stop people from listening into your network traffic over the wireless, you are going to need to encrypt it. The first encryption standard that you can use is WEP. The aim of WEP was to provide the same level of security as on a wired network, and thus the name Wired Equivalent Privacy. You may hear people refer to WEP as Wireless Encryption Protocol. This is incorrect. Even though WEP started out with the intention of being as secure as a wired network, the protocol turned out to be very easy to break. If you need to connect to an old wireless device, or if you are using an old operating system that only supports WEP, you may have no choice than to use it. Otherwise, you should use the next standard, Wi-Fi Protected Access, or WPA. WPA uses much stronger encryption than WEP. When selecting WPA, you may have the choice between WPA Personal and WPA Enterprise. The personal version uses a static pre-shared key. The pre-shared key must be set on both ends of the wireless network. It is best to use a long randomized key to protect you from dictionary attacks. The enterprise version of WPA passes the authentication request onto another system for authentication. For example, this could be a Radius server, domain controller, or a smart card. WPA is harder to hack than WEP, but unfortunately it can be hacked if you use a password based on a dictionary word. The next protocol is WPA2. This is an improved version of WPA. It offers improved security over WPA, so if available, you should use this over WPA. WPA2 is also available in personal and enterprise versions. The last protocol you can use to secure your wireless is 802.1x. This protocol provides access by authenticating the request to a back-end server. If you are using the enterprise version of WPA or WPA2, 802.1x is used to communicate back to the authenticating server. To understand how 802.1x works, consider this diagram. The laptop shown connects to a wireless access point. The wireless point then passes the request onto a back-end server for authentication, usually Radius. The server responds back with a yes or no to the wireless access point. The access point will then either grant or deny access to the computer to the network based on the response from the authentication server. A lot of people believe that 802.1x is only for wireless access. However, it does support wired networks as well. I think a lot of people get confused because the wireless protocols start with 802 as well. 802.11x supports usernames and passwords as well as other authentication methods like certificates. Wireless networks operate in one of two modes. The first is infrastructure mode. Infrastructure mode works like a hub or a switch. The clients connect to the wireless access point, which is connected up to a wired network. This is the most commonly used mode for wireless and is relatively easy to set up. The next mode is ad hoc mode. In ad hoc mode, two or more wireless devices communicate with each other without the use of a wireless access point. Ad hoc mode can also be used to access devices like a wireless projector. Ad hoc networks tend to be a bit harder to set up than connecting to a wireless access point, and in a business environment, ad hoc networks are rarely, if ever, used. Let's have a look at how to use wireless networking on Windows Server 2008. On Windows Server 2008, you can install your wireless network card as you would any other network adapter. However, you will find that the wireless adapter will not work correctly. After installing your wireless adapter, if you go into Device Manager, you will probably find that the device driver did not load. In the Device Manager, the driver will have an exclamation mark next to it. This is because in Windows Server 2008, unlike Windows Vista or Windows 7, you need to install an additional feature if you are planning to use wireless on your server. To enable wireless on Windows Server 2008, run Server Manager and then from Features, select the option Add Features. The feature that we require is the wireless LAN service. This feature is at the bottom of the list. The wireless LAN service should not take very long to install. On this server, it took less than a minute. You will notice that Server Manager did not prompt us to reboot the computer. However, if I open Computer Management and then from inside Computer Management go to the Device Manager, you will notice that my network wireless adapter has an exclamation mark next to it. Because of the missing feature, Windows Server 2008 was not able to load the wireless adapter device driver. In order to get the device driver to run, I need to reboot Windows Server 2008. Once the server has rebooted, I should be able to access my wireless card. I've accelerated the process of rebooting so we don't have to wait. To start using wireless, you need to set up a wireless connection. To do this, open the control panel. From inside the control panel, open the option View Network Status and Tasks. If I select the option Connect or Disconnect, this will show me all the wireless networks that I have access to. If I move over Extreme, for example, I can see how strong the signal strength is and also what type of wireless protocol is being used on the wireless access point. As stated before, WEP is an easy protocol to break, but having said that, you will still find wireless networks that use the WEP protocol to encrypt their data. You will also notice that some people still don't secure their network with any protocol. When a wireless network is unsecured, it means that anybody can come along and start using that wireless network without permission. To demonstrate how wireless works, I'll connect to the Extreme network. Once I select the network, I need to enter in the secret key. It is a good idea to select the option Hide Characters. Otherwise, when you type in your password for the wireless access point, anyone looking over your shoulder will be out to get your password. Windows Server 2008 will now attempt to connect up to the wireless access point. You'll notice that once it has connected, the wireless access point will be added as a connection in the Network and Sharing Center. If I left-click the connection, I will be taken into the wireless network connection status. If I now select the option Wireless Properties, I can set a few options. The first option will automatically connect when the network is in range. The second option will connect to a more preferred network if it is available. In just a moment, I will go into more detail about what a preferred network is. The last option will connect to the network even if the SSID is not being broadcast. Notice also down at the bottom the option Copy this network profile to a USB flash drive. This is basically exporting the network settings into a file so it might be read on another computer. On the Security tab, you can change the type of security, the encryption standard, and the security key of the wireless connection. If you ever need to change your wireless settings, for example, just say you upgraded your computer to a new router that supports wireless N, where the previous model only supported wireless G, then you may need to come in here and change your settings. To change your settings, first select the option Manage Wireless Networks. You'll notice on this screen the network I just connected to. However, if there are multiple networks that you are connected to, each of these networks will be listed with the network at the top being the preferred network. In other words, when the computer moves around, it will attempt to connect to the networks in order from the top to the bottom. The networks I have looked at so far have been wireless infrastructure networks. If, however, you wanted to set up an ad hoc network, you need to go back into the Network and Sharing Center and select the option Set up a new connection or network. From the wizard, go right down to the bottom and select the option Set up a wireless ad hoc network. Once you are past the information screen, you'll be asked for a network name and a security key. Notice also the option Save this network. If you select this option, the ad hoc network will be saved for future use. That's it. Once the wizard is completed, your ad hoc network is ready to go. This concludes the basics of setting up a wireless network adapter on one computer. Let's have a look at how you would set up wireless adapters on a domain with hundreds or thousands of computers. In order to configure wireless in your domain, you need to create what is called a Bootstrap wireless profile, which is basically a number of group policy settings. Once you create your Bootstrap wireless profile, this will allow your clients to be automatically configured to connect to your network using wireless. In order to do this, a client must first download the group policy via a wired network. The Bootstrap wireless profile can also contain certificates if your network uses them. When set up correctly, you can also use single sign-on, which allows your users to connect to your wireless and wired networks using one login. Let's have a look at how to configure a Bootstrap wireless profile using group policy. First of all, I need to create a new group policy. To do this, I will open up Server Manager, expand down through Features and Group Policy Management, all the way down to my domain. On my domain, I will right-click on it and select Create a GPO in this domain and link it here. For the name of the policy, I will call it Wireless Bootstrap and then right-click on the newly created policy and select Edit. One important thing to take note of here is that even though we are creating a group policy for wireless networks, the policy has to be applied to the computer at some stage. For this to occur, the computer will be plugged into the wired network first, and then the group policy will be applied from the wired network onto the computer so it can be used with the wireless network. To configure the settings for wireless, I need to expand down to Wireless Network, which is found in Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, and then down to Security Settings, and then finally right down to Wireless Network. To create the new policy, I need to right-click on Wireless Network and then select the option Create a new wireless network policy for Windows Vista and later releases. Also notice that I have the option to create a new Windows XP policy if I still have computers on the network that are running Windows XP. In this particular case, I am using Windows Server 2008 to do our demonstration. Windows Server 2008 is built on Windows Vista technology, so I will select the first option, Create a new wireless network policy for Windows Vista and later releases. Next, I'm going to enter in a policy name, which in this case I will call Domain Wireless. I can also enter in a description, which in this case I will enter in Bootstrap Wireless Profile for the domain. You will notice the tick box here. Use Windows WLAN Auto-Config service for clients. This is the same service that I had to enable in Windows Server 2008. However, in clients like Windows Vista and Windows 7, it is automatically enabled by default. I would recommend leaving this tick box ticked because this service makes configuring wireless a lot easier for your end users. Down here you have the option to connect to available networks in the order of profiles listed below. If I select the Add button, you can see that I can add an infrastructure network or an ad hoc network. Regardless of which networks you add, the profiles for the network will be tried in the order they appear in the list. In other words, Windows will try each of the wireless networks in order starting from the top all the way down to the bottom. In this particular case, I'm going to add an infrastructure network because this is the most common. Again, I need to enter in a profile name. In this case, I will call it Company Wireless Networks. On the next section, you need to enter in the names of the networks that you want to connect to. In this case, I will add in the network Extreme. You could add in here as many networks as you prefer. The option Connect automatically when this network is in range, I find it best to leave it ticked. What this means is that when a computer comes into range of that network, it will automatically, without any user interaction, connect to that network. Also, the next option, Connect to a more preferred network if available, is very useful in a lot of cases. What this means is that if a better network comes along, for example, just say there was a preferred network that had a stronger signal strength, Windows will automatically connect to that network. This is really useful when you have computers that move around the worksite and may change between different wireless access points throughout the day. If your wireless access point is not broadcasting the SSID, you want to select the option Connect even if the network is not broadcasting. In most cases, the SSID will be broadcasting because it makes it a lot easier for end users to find your wireless network. However, in the old days, disabling the SSID was done to help protect your network. Nowadays, any hacker with a decent amount of skill will be able to get around the fact that your wireless access point is not broadcasting the SSID. Next, I want to set up some security for my wireless network, so I will select the Security tab. You can select a lot of different ways to authenticate your wireless access point. We talked about these earlier in the video. The best one to select is WPA2, and since I have a Radius server on the network to do authentication, I can select the enterprise version. The next option for encryption is Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES for short. This is the default, and I suggest you leave it on because it is the better standard out of the two. You can also select TKIP, which is also a good encryption system. However, you will find that most wireless devices on the network now support the AES standard. The next option, Protected EAP or PEEP, is a protocol that allows us to use another authentication protocol over it. For example, certificates. Now, if I select the Properties button, you can see that I can see a lot of certificate options. If you are planning to use certificates, you will want to leave this option on. Validate Server Certificate. This allows your client to check the server certificate to make sure the server is an authorized server. Without this, a hacker could create their own Radius server to authenticate users. If you want to specify a server for the client to connect to, you can enter it here. However, this step is usually not necessary. Down here I have Trusted Root Certificate Authorities, and you should tick the ones that you are using on your network. To try and reduce the number of prompts the users receive, I will tick the next option. Do not prompt users to authorize new servers or trusted certification authorities. Ticking this option will prevent a number of dialog boxes appearing to the end user and hopefully will make the Windows experience a little bit easier when using wireless networking. This option down here allows you to use MSCHAP version 2 over EAP. What this basically means is that Windows will pass the username and password entered in by the user to authenticate them during logon and try it on the wireless network. If this is done correctly, a user only needs to put their username and password in once and they'll be authenticated on the domain and on the wireless network. Single sign-on features like these make the end-user Windows experience a lot easier. If you don't want this feature, you can always press the Configure button and then switch it off. This does make things a bit more complicated for the user, but then again, it does give you more security because it means that if the computer was left unattended, a malicious user can't use the computer and then start connecting to the wireless networks without entering in a username and password. The option Enable Fast Reconnect is useful when you have a computer that is moving between multiple access points. What this will do is remember your authentication details when your computer is moved out of range of the wireless access point. When the computer moves back into range, it has the connection details cached and can use them to reconnect. This is a lot faster than having to re-authenticate your computer on the access point a second time. Ticking the option Enforce Network Access Protection allows you to use NAP with this wireless profile. Depending on which version of Windows you're using, this may appear as Enable Quarantine Checks. Regardless of which name appears in here, both settings are referring to NAP or Network Access Protection. This option here, Disconnect the server if it does not present crypto binding TLV, is only required with certain Radius servers. As a troubleshooting step, you may need to enable this if you're using a third-party Radius server. If you are using Network Policy Server, Microsoft's Radius server, you shouldn't need to enable this option. If I tick the box Enable Identity Privacy, I can enter in a name, for example, Guest. This name will be used to identify the computer when connecting up to a wireless access point. Once the identity is confirmed, the computer will stop using Guest and use its correct identity for the computer. What this does is stop a hacker from presenting themselves as a wireless access point to your computer and then trying to obtain information about the identity of your computer. Until the authenticating radius server is identified as being a trusted server through the use of certificates, the computer will still identify itself as guest. That's all the settings I want to configure through this profile. If I go back now, you will notice the new profile has been added to the list. Also notice the options for import and export. This allows you to import or export your wireless settings to or from another computer. This is a really useful feature because this means you can configure your wireless network on another computer. For example, I could configure my wireless network on a laptop, and then, once it is properly configured and working, export the settings and then import them into group policy. When you do this, you know that these settings have been tested and work correctly. If I now go to the Network Permissions tab, I can configure what users can do and can't do with wireless networking. For example, I can add wireless networks in here and deny the user the ability to even view the wireless network. Setting the option here, Prevent Connections to Ad Hoc Networks, prevents the user from creating their own ad hoc networks. You may want to configure this setting on your network. This option, Prevent Connections to Infrastructure Networks, is not likely one that you would want to set, as most wireless networks are configured in infrastructure mode. If this option is ticked, the user can view any denied networks set above. If you want any local user to be able to create a wireless profile that can be used by any other user that logs on to that computer, you will want to tick this option. Allow everyone to create all user profiles. If this option is not ticked, any wireless profile that is created by a user on that computer can only be used by that particular user. If you want to create a wireless profile that is available to all users, this would need to be created by a user that is a member of the administrators group. The option here will prevent users from creating new wireless profiles, and they will only be able to use the wireless profiles that are specified in group policy. These settings below only apply to Windows 7. Windows 7 has a feature which allows Windows 7 to be used like a wireless access point. If you don't want users using Windows 7 like a wireless access point, you need to select the option Don't Allow Hosted Networks. This option here, Don't Allow Shared User Credentials for Network Authentication, basically means that Windows 7 will not save their username and password for things like network drives for later use. For example, when you map a network drive and you get the option to save the username and password for later use, if you tick this option, Windows 7 will not save the username and password on the local computer for that later use, and the user will need to enter in their username and password every time they connect up to that network drive. If you enable block period, a Windows 7 computer will not be able to use the Auto Connect feature to reconnect to a wireless network until the block period expires. That's it for the group policy for wireless networks. Remember, however, that if you want a particular wireless setting for a particular group of computers, you can always create a group policy specifically for just a particular organization unit. In summary, when setting up your wireless access point, use a difficult-to-guess password. If you decide to use WPA to secure your wireless access point, there is software available that can be used to hack into your wireless access point when WPA is used to secure it. This hacking software is based on dictionary attacks, so using a complex password will help secure your access point against this type of attack. Also remember that if you use a public access point, for example one that may be located inside a coffee shop, the access point may not use any encryption at all. This means that any communication from your computer to the access point can be intercepted by a hacker in the range of that access point. When using a public access point, make sure you think about what kind of data you are transferring to the access point and when possible, use a VPN. In the exam, you may see the term Bootstrap Wireless Profile. Remember that Bootstrap Wireless Profile is just the wireless settings that have been deployed using group policy. Remember that when you deploy a wireless network, take some time to consider what kinds of security mechanisms you want to put in place to safeguard your network.